to the PinLeader Podcast, where strategic leaders get straight to the topics, strengthening our awareness and sharpening our minds. The PinLeader Podcast is produced by REO, a production division of Mays & Associates Ltd. Find out more at www.maysassociatesltd.com. Now here is your award-winning host, Dr. Shanda Gore.
And welcome to the PinLeader Podcast. I'm so very excited to have with me Alex Davis. And if that name does not sound familiar to you, it will here, at least music to your ears and funkadelic to your ears. But I'm so excited to have him. He's an extraordinary recording artist. He is a producer. He's an engineer. He owns his own company, and he's worked with the greats from Billy Idol to Seal to Chicago, REO Speedwagon, Yanni, Tom Petty, and you may have seen him working in a position of Sly and the Family Stone. And so I'm very excited to have him here. He has so much experience and is truly a pin leader in the area of music. So welcome to the show, Alex.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. I mean, I was looking at the resume of all that you've done, and I'm just so very excited. And so I'm going to have you talk a little bit about your history, and then that will be obvious about what your passion is. But could you talk about your history and really where you got started? That's an amazing story.
I've always loved music. I was always intrigued with music. When I was a child, around 5 years old in kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher, music teacher in first grade, kindergarten, said, "You have an astounding voice, and we got to get you in some music program or something." And I was like, okay. And so the next thing I know, the teacher shows up at my house. Now, normally back then, when a teacher shows up at your house, you're in for it. But they told me to go out of the room, and then the teacher sat down with my parents and told them, "Look, you got to get this kid in a music program or something." So the result of that was my mom buying an upright piano and having me take piano lessons for 3 years. And I enjoyed that, but I found that I was more creative by ear than I was by reading music. And I found that a lot of the music notation, the people who transcribe music aren't always very accurate. So I had the records in the house, and back then you didn't have YouTube. You didn't have any kind of instructional nothing. You had to go to a teacher, or you stuck your head in a speaker. I stuck my head in a speaker. And then my grandma, through some family social interference thing, decided that she was going to get me a drum set because my dad played drums. And long story short, my dad was an only child, and my grandma felt like my mom was stealing my dad from her, but in actuality, my dad was stealing the mom. And so she bought the drum set to mess up the piano lessons.
I see.
That worked great, because as soon as I heard drums, I was like, I'm in. And I just beat that drum set to a pulp. Within a year, it was tissue paper. So I had to wait 3 years to get a real drum set somewhat. And I did that. And then I used to track record companies because I knew that was my passion. So like most kids would keep a black book with girls' names and pictures and stuff, I had a little black book, and I had all the record companies' addresses in it in alphabetical order. Now, the thing you discover doing this is that a lot of record labels own other record labels. It's like Atlantic owns like 20 labels under it. It owns Stack. It owns Springboard. So I started putting this together because when I was putting these Springboard records, and then I look in 1680, Broadway Boulevard, New York, and I go, there's somebody else that's got a Broadway Boulevard. And I go to, boom, Atlantic, So it kind of blew my mind. And then I was getting picked up because I was very talented. I didn't realize.
Well, what age are we talking about right now? When you say
we're talking 12, we're talking between 10 and 14 years old. I was getting called upon to spin music at my junior high school over the intercom through the whole school. They trusted me enough to know that I knew jazz, I knew R&B, I knew funk, and I would mix it up, but play enough of it that it didn't lean to one side or the other. The teacher could enjoy it, I could enjoy it. I moved on. I would get calls by jazz bands whose drummer would get arrested or something would happen and they'd need somebody. And my name would all of a sudden come up and I would go in and I would hold it down. And my mom would let me go. My dad traveled a lot for a living, so he was never around. My mom was the matriarch of the family. And she said, look, bring them home safe. Don't let them drink. And so it was great. And over the course of time, I would be playing with these wonderful musicians and singers. And
Can you talk a little bit about that too? I mean, what singers and who were they?
God, these were some great people. Some of the guys from the OJs, because they were from Canton. And, there was a couple of bands where these people went on to do gospel stuff because, you're always involved with the church. And I would wonder, why aren't these people famous? They're as good as Nancy Wilson. They're as good as Luther Vandross before Luther Vandross. And I would go, why aren't they? And then by the end of the night, I would see that the guy turned into a lush and he could barely finish the night. And I would go, okay, so I guess I won't be drinking when I get famous. And all the time I'm thinking forward. I'm thinking there, and all the time people are saying, you're not going to, you kidding? Forget about it. You better get a real job. You better learn something. And I was like, this is my job. This is my passion. So through school, I was able to keep my marks high. And by the time I got to high school, I was supposed to attend a city high school where I grew up. And my dad had got to a point where he bought a house in the suburbs and we were kind of moving on up. And next thing I know, I moved from a school where there's 13 whites and the rest are all black to a school where there's 13 blacks and the rest are all white. Now, I never had any racial issues. I like music, and music is even. Nobody looks at anybody. That's not what it's about. Everything comes from here. Everything comes from your passion. We all share a passion. So there are some white rappers like Eminem that are just as bad as any black rappers. There are some black rockers like Fishbone and King's X. They're as hard as any heavy metal white band. So that your race never came into play in musical circles.
So let me ask you a question about that. So you've got that experience, and it's pretty at a young age, and you're passionate. Your mom's watching over you. She's asking others to watch over you. Your talents are growing, and you've got like this eclectic experience with different races. And so you're going in. So leapfrog me into some of this. If you actually you're young, we're talking really young.
Yeah.
When are you starting to perform? You're always performing with these, as a leader. I mean, you're holding down the beat, you're a drummer. What kind of reaction are you getting from individuals that are playing that have other drummers? Like, I'm trying to picture what this Billy Idol interaction or
okay.
Chicago, what's that look like?
Well, leaping forward, I kept playing, and at first I would play with anybody that would have me. And then it starts to get thin on the ground, and I would start getting into bands that I would help put together. And all of that started to work. And then I realized, growing up in Ohio all this time, that there was only so much I could do in Ohio. There's only a certain level. You hit the ceiling and you got to start dealing with people. And then you start learning about the business, the corruption, how you got to, they make 65, you make 35. It's like America's Got Talent. Those guys that win those contests for the first 3 years, they don't make anything. the people that promoted them make everything. So they put out that first album and everything's big, and then they put out that's all the songs they spent their whole life writing too, by the way. That's all the songs they wanted people to hear, but they don't get a blind share of that. A whole bunch of other people. So then you have to come up with album number 2. And album number 2 is like, well, if you really got it, here's where the rubber meets the road. And either you have it and things come off well for you, or things don't go so well and they decide, well, this is not the 60s. We're not going to dump a lot of money into this, developing him. We're just going to let him go. And now we got ours. We're going to move on to the next winner. With respect to the people you're talking about, famous people, when I graduated high school, I had the option of graduating early. I opted to graduate my class because I always hung out with upperclassmen, and I thought the upperclassmen were going to be there and this was my friends. But really what I didn't realize is they had all graduated. So they told me if I wanted to stay in school, I had to take a vocation. So I took electronics, majoring in audio. And I graduated from high school with an associate degree in electronics, and also as the most talented in my high school. Okay. I had no idea anybody was even paying attention to my, but I had enrolled in all the drumming stuff. So I had done marching band, jazz band, pep band, any kind of band. I was in it. Orchestra. I was in orchestra. Anything that had drums in it, I was in. And so that snowballed into, after I got out of school, I used my electronics experience to start my own electronics business. And I started repairing musical instruments for the school system, Akron Public School System. I would repair Fender Rhodes and Wurlitzers, and musicians would come through. I'd meet Leslie West, I think, from Mountain, the guitar player from Mountain who did Mississippi Queen. I worked on his guitar. Next thing I know, I'm working on that. And then there was nightclubs in town that would blow up stuff. And I would go to the club, and all of a sudden, I'm designing and putting in sound systems for these guys. And they're trusting me. I'm like 22, 25. So then I get married, and I decide I want to move to Los Angeles. And that's when things really started to change for me. Is I jumped into from the small fish bowl to the large fish bowl, and really started to see if I could get in. Well, at the time I moved there, heavy metal was big, hair bands were big. This was the 80s, and I'm trying to sell jazz and R&B. So I had to conform. And once again, this goes to the theory of, if you're not doing well where you are, go to where the work is. I would have never gone to Los Angeles had Cleveland and the Akron area been fruitful and a fertile ground, but I didn't see that. In the first chance I got to leave, it was either go to New York or go to LA.
So it brings up a point about leadership.
Yes.
Because you've got to be able to know where the trends are and say, you know what, I'm not going to make it here, so I'm going to diversify and go somewhere else. And that's a willingness of a whole family structure to be able to move to do that. Not everybody can do that.
No.
But not everybody can do that. So you go to Los Angeles, and again, you are trying to make it, and you've got these skills though. And this is another thing with leadership. You diversified yourself. So it wasn't just one thing. You weren't just a drummer. You had this electronic, which brought a value add, right?
Yes.
To the whole equation, so that when you're sitting, and leads up to like the Billy Idols and the REO Speedwagon, how did you wind up there?
Okay. Just backtrack just a little bit. When I graduated high school, I asked my dad, who was a former musician, what I should do. He asked me what I wanted to do with my life. I said I wanted to be a musician. He gave me one of these Yosemite Sam looks where he grabbed his face, he pulled it down like this, and he let it go, and it came up and went like that. And I go, what? So what? What does the great Buddha have to bestow on me? And he says, learn a trade. And that's where the electronics came in. He said the music industry is going to take a crap on your forehead. No matter how talented you are, you're going to need something to fall back on to support your wife and your kids and everything. And I'm going, wife? Kids? What are you talking about?
Thinking about that.
I ain't going to get married. I'm going to get a girlfriend and I'm going to rock out.
Yes.
But that advice saved me. And, when I came to LA, I said, okay, I got a regular job. I was repairing intercom systems in fast food restaurants. You know how you drive up? I was supervisor for putting those coils in and doing that. And on my own time, I was working for free at a recording studio because that's how you get in. You go in and you just work and you go get donuts and you go get coffee and then he found out I had technical skills, so they tried to exploit me. So they had me fixing cables and aligning tape machines and being second engineer on sessions. And I was meeting Smokey Robinson. I was meeting Tiffany's studio was where The Time recorded. Smokey Robinson recorded, and a bunch of other artists, some pop jazz, what do you call it? Smooth jazz artists were recording at George Tobin's studio in North Hollywood, California, off of Burbank. And I did that for a while, and then I just got tired of being exploited. So I went back to playing, got in with a corporate band called the Copycats, and we would play weddings and bar mitzvahs and funerals and divorces and all this. I'm meeting famous people because this is LA. Everybody.
Right. You sound like The Wedding Singer, but in a better setting. The movie The Wedding Singer, but in a much better setting. So you're actually meeting people.
Yeah. So I met Jackson Brown's publisher's son had a bar mitzvah. Jackson Brown shows up. I'm playing and singing Use Me by Bill Withers, and he sits down right here and stares at me the whole time I'm singing, and I'm going, this is Jackson Brown. Yes. I got his records, and after I knew he was coming, so I brought an album, and we talked a little bit, and I had him sign it. But long story short, I wound up working for a rehearsal studio called Third Encore. Third Encore was like the top rehearsal studio in town. Everybody was there. Tom Petty, Chicago, Yanni, all these bands were there. And I worked there as a tech and as a second engineer. So when they would rehearse, like for example, Billy Idol would rehearse, they would be up on stage, but I would be running the sound system. And they would say, okay, I need to hear the drums a little bit more here. And I would be the guys turning the knobs on that. And that's, that was numerous sessions, Seal, Chicago, Yanni. And I was involved with all these people, and I could see the type of talent that I wanted to go out and tour with. Yet I still wasn't in the position to tour with them because LA is very click. All the major cities got hooks. It's not about how talented you are. It's about who you know and how talented you are. So a lot of people catch breaks just because they were born under the right sign, and other people have to earn it.
So that's another point here, right? Is that it's not a matter, don't be frustrated if you're so talented, but somehow you're not in front or you're not the one actually performing. We're talking about, like, again, and it sounds to me, a couple of points here, patience, willing to really put yourself out there, now you were working for free for a while. We're not suggesting everybody go out and work for free, but there's one piece about willingness to get the coffee, to build relationships, build trust.
Perseverance. You gotta stick with it. You gotta stay, some of my breaks came by other people not getting a break. That is, people who were famous and doing stuff for a while and just decided, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to retire. Okay, well, then now a position is open. Right. Now, who gets to fill that? Is it me? Is it this other guy? Is it this other guy? Who best fits the bill? Some bands hire people based off of their acquaintances, who they know. For example, when The Who lost their drummer, Keith Moon, they took Kenny Jones from the Small Faces as their drummer. Kenny Jones did Itchy-Coo Park. He did I am a little tin soldier who wants to step into your dream. He was in that band, and The Who knew him. He was a British mate. So they brought him in. He wasn't as talented as Keith Moon, who is Mr. Wild Man, but he held it down and they brought him in. Now, when Led Zeppelin lost their drummer, they decided nobody can fill this guy's shoes. We're just going to disband. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, some things bring opportunities, some things don't. When Steve Perry left Journey, they needed somebody who sounded like Steve Perry because not everybody sounds like Steve Perry.
Steve Perry, that's hard to mimic. This brings up to another point. Let's talk about you filling in and taking the spot of someone else. Oh no, I'm taking you there. You're talking about all these other people. We're not talking about them. We're talking about you, Alex.
Okay.
You have filled in the spot, and I'm going to ask because we're with timing. I want to give you. Can you get a little bit of a taste? I got your keyboards right there. A little bit of taste of something that maybe somebody has heard that might sound familiar that you actually slid into a spot and actually performed in. I'm thinking of of a couple of songs, but maybe someone, please share.
Sometimes I'm right and I can't be wrong. My own beliefs are in my soul. The butcher, the banker, the drummer, and then makes no difference what group I'm in. I know in everyday people. Yeah. Anyway.
So I wonder. So you went into a position with Sly and the Family Stone. So are you saying you became Sly? What happened here?
Okay. Hold on. Vibrations in here are making things move. Okay. So what happened was I told you I was in a corporate band called the Copycats. And there was a lot of guys who played in that band from time to time. Guitarists from Tower Power played in that band. The keyboard player from John Fogerty played in that band. We're all still friends. Well, Tower Power's guitar player passed away. But the keyboard player for John Fogerty, I just ran into him at the music convention, NAMM, this year. There was always people coming through. And one of the bass players knew the saxophone player from Sly and the Family Stone. And he said, they keep going through singers, but they just can't find the right guy. You would be excellent for that. Let me introduce you. So he introduced me to the guy, and we got together at the bass player's business, which was a carpet company. And he had a big warehouse in the back, and he would rehearse his band. He had a band there. And I came, and I was singing from behind the drums, because that's my thing. Drums was my thing. And he liked it. And we jammed together, and then nothing happened. And then about a year later, MySpace was like Facebook is. And I was on MySpace, pulling all my friends together and my contacts and everything. And I saw Jerry, and I hit Jerry's thing, and I said, "Hey, Jerry, remember me, Alex?" Da, 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 da. And he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm not doing anything. I just left a gig at the Bellagio I've been doing for 3 years, and I'm kind of on hiatus." He says, "You want to play with the band?" I said, "Sure." He says, "Okay, I'm going to send a guy over, our bass player's in Las Vegas, and I'm going to send him over to connect with you." So he sent the guy over. And at that time, I was just starting my electronics repair business in Vegas. So I was basically in a condo, working off a road case in my dining room and my dining room table. Those were my two workbenches. And I was repairing keyboards and stuff off of there. And so I always had equipment around. My drums and all my extra stuff was in storage. I didn't have enough room to hold all the stuff in my condo. So the guy came by. He says, "I'm coming by, and we're going to run through a couple songs. Let's see if you know." And I'm like, I know all the Sly and the Family Stone stuff. I know all of that stuff. So I pulled out all the Sly records that I had. It was like this wide. And I put them on the floor in the living room. And then I took a keyboard that I had fixed for a client, fancy keyboard, more than I could afford at the time. And I put that on my living room table in front of the couch. And I started doing, and I got it working, put it through a little guitar amplifier. And then he comes over and he goes, "Okay, do you know this song?" I go, "Yeah." I start singing a little bit, dance to the music. I said, okay, we got that. Okay. Do you know everyday people? Sometimes I'm right and I can be wrong. And I did that. Okay. So he said, okay, can you play keyboards? I said, well, which song? He says, well, all the songs have keyboards in them. I said, okay, what key? Are you doing the key of the record? Are you transposing, changing the key? And he said, well, we're doing this key, because he was the musical director. So he knew all the keys. So I sat down and I was able, while we were sitting there, to pick out all the keys of the songs. And I said, now, here's the thing. Sly had two keyboard players, himself and his sister Rose. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to consolidate this and play what we call the signature parts. I'm going to have to make sure that all the signature parts come together to make this cohesive. So I can do that. I took piano lessons now I'm going back to my old piano stuff, and I'm bringing all that forward. And I'm like, this is going to be, in my head, I'm going, this is going to be great, because I was starting to lose a little bit of my ability to ascertain parts in music. I'm kind of got ADD in as much as if I walk into a supermarket and a song is playing, while I'm talking to you, my brain is going, okay, they got bass, they got two guitars, they got keyboards, and the guys got 4 synthesizers. Okay, they got shakers, they got a cowbell. My brain just goes there. I don't have any control over it. So anyway, long story short, he hooked me up with the Family Stone. We go out and tour. We get together, and no rehearsal.
Wait a minute. Stop right there. So you now are part of the band, and there's no rehearsal. And so what are we facing? You're going out, and what do you look, what's the crowd look like? Help us out, Alex. What's a crowd look like?
Yeah. Well, they weren't. I'd always wondered why I never heard from the band when they were so famous back in the 70s. And the reason was that each one of the band members at some time tried to start their own version of the band. And at some point, there was 3 different bands. The sax player had a band, the trumpet player had a band, and the drummer had a band. So when somebody went to hire them, they never knew who they were hiring. That's number one. And number 2, they always promised that Sly was going to show up. Sly never showed up, and there was never anyone that sounded like Sly or looked like Sly in any of those bands. So now they've consolidated. They're one band, but there's 3 bosses. So things are politically kind of unstable. But now I'm in the band, and people are telling me the original guitar player, Freddie, Sly's brother, saw us once, and he goes, "You don't just sound like my brother, you look like my brother." And it was like somebody took car battery cables and put them on my body. I just went.
So right there, you look like him, you sound like him, and so people are leaning on you to go ahead and lead the band. What's the biggest crowd you've actually had in front of you? Just
Golden Gate Park. We played Glastonbury, which is the Woodstock of the UK, and they have 3 big stages going on. So, like, I think we played on a stage, Lionel Richie played on a stage, and we played on a stage, and on another stage, the Rolling Stones were playing. We had 5,000 people. The Rolling Stones had about 20,000. So that was one year. The next year we went out, we were on a big stage with George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic. Lionel Richie's on another stage. We drew as many people as the Rolling Stones drew, about 15,000 people. And there's a BBC concert movie video of this whole thing. We opened for George, and then we did the encore together. Now, the largest that I can remember ever playing to was we did a concert in Golden Gate Park. 25,000 people. It was a sea of people all the way through the park. As far as you could see, there was nothing but people, and it's tree lined. So they're all in this thing that just goes back. it looked like forever. It looked like it went back a half mile, and they had video screens set up all so far down the sides for people who couldn't see, because I'm sure to the people in the back I was this big.
You probably barely, but they couldn't tell what was going on, probably that from way back there, but they could hear you because of the
They could hear
speakers.
us. And
So
that
let me
was,
ask you. So let me ask you this. So you've got 25,000 people here to hear, to hear you. What did that feel like? And then another question, part two to this is, again, as a leader of the band at the time, what did you tell them before they went out on stage? Because you're a team out there. So first question is, how did it feel? And then two, what did you do as a leader, like to get ready your whole crew so that you would be one team when you went out?
okay, when you play any music enough, it starts to become a little bit grueling. Even your most favorite songs, you have to change up and play something else. When you're in a band, you don't have that option. Not only that, a lot of times you don't even have the option of changing the order of the songs. Very frustrating when you're the leader of the band. That is, I felt like a bus driver that was being told where to go, but had no control over how much gas was in the bus, whether the tires needed changing, where we could stop to go to the bathroom. I had absolutely no control. I was the figurehead, much like the president is the figurehead of the country, but all the other people are controlling how things run. That was where I was. And I told them coming in, I said, look, if I do my job right, there's going to be a lot of nepotism because I'm going to get all the light and everybody else is going to be second. And a lot of those people in the band had done this before. They don't, this was nothing to them. But you're asking me how I felt. My biggest thing before a performance was remain distracted. Don't think about what you're going to do. That way, every time you come out, it's fresh. When I came out to 25,000 people, I won't say I was frightened. The most I've been frightened was the first time I was on stage in a talent show in junior high school. I was scared less. I was scared. I thought I was going to die on stage. I thought literally I was going to walk out there, the lightning bolt, boom, Alex is dead. After I got through that, I never was afraid to hit the stage again. But when you see that many people, you get an energy from it. It's unreal, but it's reciprocal. That is, you're putting energy out there and you feel these waves of energy coming to you, which reinforces you that you're doing something good, something righteous, both good and righteous. Okay. And it's just like, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I love it.
So this, because of timing, I want to get to like what you would advise, because I know I only have you for so long because you're out to your next thing that you're doing.
Okay.
What is advisement that you would give? What are the top 3 things that you would advise someone who's actually wanting to be a leader in the music industry? And again, you're a leader in different areas because you're engineering and producing and owning your own business. But what would you tell someone that the 3 top qualities that you would need to be a leader?
Okay. Number 1, you have to be your own support group. You have to believe in yourself. Do not ever let anyone tell you that you can't do what you want to do. And in doing that, you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to accomplish your goal. I don't mean robbing, I don't mean thieving, but you have to. In my case, I always made sure I held down a day job while I pursued my career in music until one financially outweighed the other. Then I could let this one go and I could surf this. And in the music industry, there's always going to be highs and lows. So if you're on a low, you're on the way up. And if you're on a high, expect something to happen to bring that down. Because the one certainty in life in any profession is change, and you have to be willing to adapt and go with the flow. Now, in the second thing, in today's market, it's not like it was before. Before, your success was measured with the sale of hard goods, records, tapes, CDs, videos. Now everything is streaming. And the problem with that is that the person, for example, who's top of the charts right now on Billboard is top of the charts based off of projected streams, projected sales, projected streams, no hard goods. So what I'm finding is, this is my observation, is that the people who do the best on the charts are like America's Got Talent, the people who draw the most interest. And they normally are backed by people who have money. And
so that second point is about just there's a change in the way even the currency in this music industry is going. Okay.
Yeah. And the third thing is, when you're starting out, there's all kinds of pitfalls in life. Drugs, women, for males, for females, the opposite sex, guys. You have to stay healthy, well, and you have to make sure that you can provide for yourself. If that means taking a second job as a bus driver, so be it. But support yourself. You have to be able to support yourself, because you need to have the tools to make your dream come true. And you want, if you're going to be any kind of a musician, you want to make sure that you have some kind of device nearby, be it a cassette deck, anything to capture your ideas. I have a habit to this day that I always do, and I make lists.
Yes.
And then I check things off. That's the way to get things done. You've gotta make lists, and you've got to be able to record your ideas. I can't tell you how many times I've woken up in the middle of the night with a great song in my head and went, that was fantastic. Tomorrow, I'm going to get up and I'm going to record that, and that's going to be a hit. And the next day you wake up, gone.
It's gone.
So what you do is, when you get that idea, when that muse strikes, you get your butt up out of bed, you go grab a guitar, keyboard, something, you put that song down. You get the core of it, the basis, because you probably only have about 10 or 15 minutes, and then your mind is going to start extrapolating on this, and it's going to turn into something else. All you really need is the core of it. And the list thing is about getting contacts, getting management, marketing now. I'm hiring people to handle my Instagram, my websites, because you can't do it all yourself. I mean, I've done a lot myself. I'm an entrepreneur. I've got my own. I own the #1 electronic musical instrument repair business in the state of Nevada. I built that off of my experiences with repairs coming up till now. That was my fallback. So in case, every tour comes to an end. Nothing goes on forever. You might hook up with Stevie Wonder. He's got a tour for 9 months. 6 months in, Stevie decides, I'm going to cut it short.
Did that happen to you? I have to ask you, did that happen to you? Did you ever get on tour with someone? Because you mentioned you've met Quincy Jones. And so did you jump in and you go, oh, this is going to be a long time gig? And I'm sorry I digress, but I really want to know that one.
No, I've been very lucky. I've screened everybody that I'm working with very well. When I have to, as a musician, I'll give you an example. As a musician, I have 3 things I want to know when somebody wants to hire me for a gig. The #1, who's on the gig? Who am I playing with? Am I playing with musicians who are as professional as I am? I want to know this. #2, I want to know the time and place of the gig. And #3, I want to know how much I'm making. Those are the 3 things in that order, because if I'm playing with some super competent guys, if I'm playing with Herbie Hancock and Marcus Miller and the Brecker brothers and all that, I don't care if I make any money or not. Just the experience and having that on my resume is going to make me the happiest man on the planet. Now, if I'm playing with Joe Schmo and the Blows, who do this gig every Friday night for 28 years and they still don't have a record deal, then I want to make some money and I want to know how long the gig is, because this is going to be grueling. These guys have not perfected themselves. They've hit a glass ceiling, and this is just, I always approach every cover gig as if I was playing with the original guy. So when I have my cover band and I do an Eddie Money song, Rosanna steady and a country love to drive, I did it as if I was playing in Eddie Money's band. If I did a Stevie Ray Vaughan song and, I played it as if I was in Stevie Ray Vaughan's band, because if Stevie Ray Vaughan is in the audience and he hears me, I might have a gig. But if you're playing it like, I'm just playing a bunch of yokels that just came in from Oklahoma to Las Vegas to get drunk, they're not paying attention, I could fool them. You're fooling yourself, because you're not pushing yourself. You're not making yourself the viable item that you say you want to be. So you have to make your actions match your words, and you have to do it on an ongoing basis. I've been doing this for over 50 years, and every time I approach something, I approach it the same way, as if it's the most important gig of my life, and I want to get it right. That's the way you have to be, and regardless of how everybody else feels. Not saying you can't have fun, but no, I seem to be more passionate about music than most people. I don't mind having a libation or two when I'm performing, provided that it's not going to be a bunch of yin-yangs that I'm playing.
Right. Well, your point here, Alex, and I think that is really important, very important, especially with folks that want to be leaders. What you're saying here about putting your best foot forward every time and just making sure that it's clear, and watch the liberties that you're taking, because somebody's always watching. That's great. As a leader, someone is always watching. So first of all, I want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing all of this with us. As leaders in different industries, what you said, even though you're in the music industry, it truly transitions and transcends over into a number of other industries. So those are words of wisdom that I think a number of people need to hear. So thank you again, Alex.
Music's a universal language, and it speaks to all people. So I'm serious about that, and I love this. And being in the arts is probably one of the roughest business. I think stand-up comedians is probably the worst, because they don't have any support. But next to that, art is the roughest. So if you're not going to be serious about it, don't go there.
Don't go there. Great words, advice. Put yourself into it to win it. So, and so for those that are watching, please like this. Please subscribe. This is a special episode. We're on video this time because we didn't want to miss this opportunity. And I will say this as I always sign off with, until next time.
The PinLeader Podcast is hosted by Dr. Shanda Gore and brought to you by Mays & Associates Ltd, creating customized solutions for growth in the areas of leadership development, strategic planning, and culture building. Find out more at www.maysassociatesltd.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the PinLeader Podcast and share with others.